Welcome to Storytime with the Eelman Chronicles. Episode 1, Shot in the Dark, a Hero is Chosen. Somewhere in the deepest, darkest fens, the golden eel issues a decree. Go forth, my slimy servants, seek me out a worthy champion. As you can see, the eels here are all heading towards the fen. The 20th of August, 1999, 1 a.m. Bleak House, Emneth, Norfolk, home of Tony Martin, a reclusive farmer. On that fateful night, two burglars, Fred Barrist, aged 16, and Brendan Fearon, aged 29, had travelled over 70 miles to rob Tony Martin. As you can see there, Brendan Fearon is saying Old Man Martin is an easy target. Martin had been robbed several times in the past. Paranoid, all alone in his own house down a dark fen lane, some say he was lying in wait. Meanwhile, a short distance away, Spalty the eelman is returning home after another unsuccessful night trying to catch some eels. But in one short violent minute, everything changed. Smash! Bark! Boom! Click! Boom! Having only overheard about the potential treasures within Bleak House in a pub in Newark-on-Trent, Nottinghamshire, Fearon and Barris had rushed into the raid without properly researching the property. Due to the run-down, near-derelict nature of the main building, they initially disregarded it, instead breaking a window in the barn, thinking that was the main house. This alerted the guard dogs who resided in the barn. In their desperation to escape the dogs, the pair of burglars ran to seek shelter in the house. Tony Martin was waiting. Shit got very real. Martin fired several times. Fred Barris was struck in the back. He climbed through the window and crawled into the undergrowth to die. His last words were, "He's got me. I'm sorry. Please don't. Mum!" Brendan Fearon was hit in the legs and in the backside. In his frantic attempt to escape, he found the strength to tear down the entire window frame from the wall. He made a break for the road and into the path of an oncoming van. A van driven by my dad, the hero of these tales, the Eel Man. Dad slammed on the brakes. Luckily, his van only splutters to a top speed of around 30 miles per hour, so stopping in time wasn't difficult. Their eyes met for what seemed like hours, even though a mere second had passed. Fearon feebly pleaded for help, but the eelman made his decision quickly. As you can see here, the eelman's steely gaze as he understands that fen rules takes priority over a bleeding man. Knowing the high crime rate in the mysterious and lonely fens, and with his entire livelihood in the back of his van, despite being face to face with a clearly distressed and wounded man, the eelman sought guidance from his unwavering belief in the fen commandments. And the fen commandments are conveniently listed here for our reference. Number 1, never stop the van for no man. 2, thou shalt not covet another man's eels. 3, thou shalt not take the name of Almighty Bob Nudd in vain. 4, address all fellow brothers as mate, regardless of their stature. 5, toil the hardest of all men, but expect the least reward. And 6, fen rules. Cranking the eel wagon into gear, Spalt put the pedal to the metal and the van lurched into life. With the creak of rusted axles and a fog of red diesel fumes, he maneuvered round Fearon and set off back down the lane. This left Fearon to fend for himself. He was later found, alive but wounded, in the garden of a nearby cottage where he had crawled to seek some water. During this encounter, Spalt the eelman had not realized Fearon was shot. It was very dark, and he hadn't been looking at his backside. Still, he realized that something was fishy, even fishier than a regular day catching eels. he decided to inform the authorities of what he had seen. This was in the days before mobile phones, and we never had a house phone, so Dad stopped at the phone box to call the police. He explained what he had seen, and the ever-helpful and professional Wisbech Police Department told him the rest. Dad was the second person to call in after the couple whose cottage Fearon had crawled to. As you can see here, we have a transcript of the conversation, so Spalty Eelman begins with, "Hello, police. I've just seen something suspicious near Emneth." "Okay, sir. Can you describe what you saw?" "It was strange. A depressed-looking man tried to flag me down in the road. He was wearing red jeans." "Well, sir, he was certainly depressed, but they weren't red jeans. It was blood. He'd been blasted with a 12-bore shotgun." Tony Martin had left Bleak House after the shooting, and he was picked up by the police later that night whilst having a cup of tea at his mother's house in Wisbech. As you can see here, he sat with his mother. "How is everything, dear?" "Oh, you know, Mother. A bit hit and miss." The very next day, when the story broke, it was big news. Despite the similarities between the Fens and the most remote, isolated and inbred areas of the USA, shootings here are still incredibly uncommon, so a farmer using lethal force to defend his property became a national talking point. The media interest was huge, and as a star witness and a strange character in his own right, Spalty Eelman was in great demand. He was interviewed many times. Despite his lack of media etiquette training, he knew there were certain words he should avoid on TV, so strived for alternatives. These didn't always go exactly to plan. And as you can see here, my father using the language he was familiar with, but knowing that wasn't the right language to use, so he's saying, "Don't say pikey, don't say pikey, don't say pikey." And in the end, he ultimately blurted out, "He was a half-caste," which, as we all know, in the city, is also an unsuitable term to use. He also appeared on the ITV documentary A Shot in the Dark to impart more words of Fen wisdom. Strangely, offers from the Fenland District Tourism Board were not forthcoming. As you can see here, some of the quotes from the documentary. It's "Well, anything that isn't nailed down round here gets nicked. I was worried about my van, and I thought him and his mates might be having a battle." In one instance, Channel 4 even hired an actor, although I prefer to think it might have been a stuntman, to play my dad in a reconstruction of the night's events. Always watching, always waiting, the golden eel was intrigued. And now for the epilogue of our tale. Unrepentant, Tony Martin was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. Due to his paranoid personality disorder, this was reduced to 5 years for manslaughter on appeal. He was released in July 2003. He hasn't set foot in Bleak House since the night of the shooting. He spends his nights sleeping in his car, at his friends' houses, or in the old barn next door. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, he's a big fan of UKIP, the National Front, and the BNP. He is still, however, a regular sight around Wisbech, although he has been arrested and investigated several more times for illegal firearm possession, so I still wouldn't try burgling him. By all accounts, he is no big fan of the Norfolk Constabulary. "They're a bunch of bloody half-wits." It seems his actions will live on in Norfolk folklore, however. Norwich City football fans still chant about his exploits to strike fear in their opponents' hearts. And as you can see here, the chants are rising from Carrow Road. "We shoot burglars! Say we shoot burglars!" Unfortunately, however, this fearsome ritual is then completely negated by Norwich conceding loads of goals and losing most of their matches. But like they say, it's the thought that counts. Fearon sued Tony Martin for loss of earnings and emotional distress due to now being scared of fireworks, action movies, and sex. Unsurprisingly, this was thrown out of court. He went on to be jailed for dealing heroin, stealing bank cards, and generally being a nuisance. However, I am sure he loves his mum. One of the best articles about the whole episode was written by Whose Line Is It Anyway host and clean living Tony Martin doppelganger Clive Anderson. In The Independent in April 2000, he described the Eelman's testimony in court as a small, depressing detail, but he did recognize the Fens as a lawless, post-apocalyptic nightmare. And here is a quote from Clive Anderson's article in The Independent, where he said, "Rural Norfolk is no different to inner-city Brixton or the Bronx, apart from the eel catching." It's fair to say that despite the grim circumstances, Spalt the Eelman enjoyed his 15 minutes of fame. However, his story does not end there. Every day when he steers his van towards those miserable marshes, a whole host of weird and wonderful adventures await. The Eelman Chronicles will document these, past and present, in detail. Please stay tuned for more slimy sagas. Thank you very much. That is the end of today's Storytime with Spalty. Bye-bye.